Eleni Deepwhisper Wavekeep. The salt spray was a constant companion, a blessing, and a demand. Eleni Wavekeep, they called me Deepwhisper amongst the coastal folk, and for good reason. My days were measured not in hours, but in tides. I tended the shell-strewn gardens surrounding the tide hall, a structure older than memory, its stones slick with brine and echoing with the murmur of generations. Each morning, I'd gather sea-worn stones, listen for the ocean's pulse within them, and offer readings to those seeking guidance. It was a quiet life, predictable, steeped in ritual. The scent of kelp and damp stone was the very air I breathed, and I believed, truly, that I would breathe it forever. My grandmother, the previous Wavekeep, had warned me that the sea never truly sleeps, but I hadn't understood the weight of those words until now. The driftwood arrived with the storm, a grotesque sculpture of twisted limbs and barnacle-encrusted wood. But it wasn't the wood itself that was unsettling, it was what clung to it. A book. Bound in a leather so dark it seemed to absorb the light, its pages brittle and filled with a script I didn't recognize, yet somehow, understood. The storm was a furious thing, but this book felt older. Not merely ancient, but displaced. It hummed with a silence that resonated in my bones, and within the first few lines, a terrifying truth began to unfold. Records of tides and currents from epochs long past, epochs when the coastline was drastically different, when cities now submerged stood proud against the sky. A lost library, ripped from its time and cast adrift. The call was clear, this wasn't just a book, it was a fractured piece of history, and the sea had chosen me to mend it. The weight of the book felt less like paper and ink and more like centuries pressing down on my chest. To unravel its secrets, to understand the fractured timelines it contained, meant disrupting the established order, questioning the very foundations of our understanding of the sea and time itself. The coastal folk thrived on predictability, on the rhythm of the tides. To introduce the chaos of lost epochs, of drowned civilizations, felt reckless, almost sacrilegious. My duties were to interpret the sea, not rewrite its history. I considered returning the book to the waves, letting it sink back into the oblivion from whence it came. It would be easier. Safer. But the ocean doesn't offer choices, it offers currents, and resisting them only leads to exhaustion. The images within the book, cities shimmering beneath the waves, libraries swallowed by the abyss, haunted my dreams. Old Man Tiber, the last of the chronomasters, lived in a lighthouse perpetually shrouded in mist. He hadn't spoken a coherent sentence in decades, muttering only fragments of forgotten languages and equations. But he remembered. I brought him the book, and a flicker of recognition sparked in his clouded eyes. He didn't speak, but he gestured, guiding my hand across the pages, tracing constellations and patterns I couldn't comprehend. Then, he produced a small, tarnished astrolabe, an instrument that hadn't been used in generations. The currents shift, he finally rasped, his voice like pebbles grinding together. Time is a sea itself. You must learn to navigate it, Deepwhisper. The astrolabe is your compass. He explained, in fragmented sentences, that the book wasn't merely about lost time, it contained it, and the astrolabe was the key to unlocking its secrets. Leaving the tide hall felt like abandoning a part of myself. I entrusted the care of the community to my second, Lyra, and set sail aboard a small skiff, the astrolabe clutched in my hand, the book secured in a waterproof chest. I followed the currents Tiber had described, venturing further from the coastline than any Wavekeep had dared in centuries. The sea grew darker, the waves more restless. The air crackled with an unnatural energy. It wasn't just a journey across water, it was a plunge into a fractured timeline, a descent into the echoes of lost worlds. This wasn't merely leaving my home, it was stepping off the edge of the map. The currents led me to a series of shimmering anomalies, pockets of distorted time where fragments of the past bled into the present. I encountered echoes, spectral sailors from long-lost fleets, merchants hawking wares from sunken cities, scholars desperately trying to salvage knowledge from collapsing libraries. Some were helpful, offering clues and guidance. Others were hostile, guardians of forgotten secrets, resentful of my intrusion. I befriended a cartographer named Kalen, an echo from a civilization obsessed with mapping not just the land, but the currents of time itself. He warned me of the chronal race, creatures born from temporal paradoxes, intent on preserving the fractured timeline at any cost. We navigated treacherous currents, outwitted chronal race, and pieced together fragments of a lost history. The book led me to the Abyssal Archive, a massive, submerged library located at the deepest point of the ocean. It wasn't a physical structure, but a convergence of temporal energies, a place where all lost knowledge flowed together. Reaching it required navigating a labyrinth of distorted currents and evading the chronal wraiths who guarded its entrance. The closer I got, the more unstable time became, the more vivid the echoes became. I felt myself flickering in and out of existence, my memories blurring with those of others. The archive wasn't a place to find knowledge, it was a place to become it. The chronal wraiths launched a full-scale assault as I attempted to enter the archive. They weren't creatures of flesh and blood, but manifestations of temporal paradoxes, wielding the power to unravel time itself. The battle wasn't fought with weapons, but with memories, with histories, with the very fabric of reality. I used the astrolabe to anchor myself in the present, to weave a shield of temporal stability around me. Kalen sacrificed himself to create a diversion, his knowledge dissolving into the currents of time. Using the lessons I learned from Kalen and the guidance of the book, I unraveled the paradox that created the race, dissolving them back into the currents from whence they came. It wasn't a victory, but a restoration of balance. Within the heart of the archive, I found not a single book, but a temporal key, a crystalline artifact capable of repairing the fractured timeline. It wasn't a simple act of restoration, but a delicate weaving of threads, a reharmonizing of echoes. The key wasn't merely an object, it was a repository of all lost knowledge, a living testament to the resilience of time itself. I absorbed a fraction of its knowledge, understanding the true nature of the displacement and the key's potential. This wasn't about saving the past, but about understanding its echoes and integrating them into the present. Returning to my own time was not as simple as retracing my steps. The act of repairing the timeline had created ripples, altering the present in subtle, unpredictable ways. Lyra, my second, now possessed a wisdom beyond her years, guided by echoes of the restored past. The coastal folk had a newfound reverence for the sea, understanding its power and its connection to time itself. But the restoration had also awakened something ancient, something slumbering beneath the waves, a consciousness tied to the fractured timeline, resentful of its repair. The balance had been restored, but a new threat had emerged. The abyssal consciousness, a being born from the fractured timeline, rose from the depths, intent on reclaiming its lost power. It wasn't a creature of malice, but of desperate longing, seeking to restore its fragmented existence. It attacked the tide hall, manipulating the tides and unleashing storms of unimaginable fury. I faced it not as a warrior, but as a historian, a weaver of stories, offering it not battle, but understanding. I showed it the beauty of integration, the resilience of time, the power of memory. Using the knowledge gained from the temporal key, I wove a new narrative for the consciousness, a story of belonging, of acceptance, of integration. I returned to the Tide Hall, not as the Deepwhisper they once knew, but as a guardian of time, a weaver of stories. The sea was calmer now, its currents flowing with a newfound harmony. The echoes of the past were still present, but they were no longer fragmented, no longer lost. They were integrated into the present, enriching our understanding of the world. I established a new order, the Chronomasters of the Coast, dedicated to preserving the knowledge of the past and navigating the currents of time. The sea was still a mystery, but it was a mystery we were prepared to face, together, with wisdom, and with respect for the echoes of time.